back in the 1950s, most people aren't aware of it, but there was a scientific storm in America all through the late 50s about this thing out there in space, because the astronomers were all watching it, and that was back when they weren't afraid to talk about it. It was in the science magazines. I mean, I had a subscription to, like, Popular Science, and hell, it was on the front cover of the magazine one day in, like, 1961. And I was really excited when I saw it, because here's this giant red planet on the horizon of the California coast, and a humongous tidal wave coming in towards the coast, and having grew up in the mountains of the Sierras, and this thing in the magazine, it said this tidal wave coming in was going to be at least 3 miles high, and I went in and showed it to everybody in the house, and they laughed, and they said, so much coming around it. You know, we live in a solar system. We've got 9 planets and a big sun. This is just got 7 planets and its own sun. I think this one is just a big, bright, reddish-orange iron ball because it's giving off all this red iron oxide dust out into the atmosphere. At first, it was just a teeny little red speck of fuzzy red dust in the distance, but over the years, as it went by and we watched it, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then finally, about '08, we could see this thing like it was across the street, and we could see that it was a blazing hot ball of fire, giving out sparkles of red iron oxide dust for thousands of miles in every direction. And you could see the planet circulating it. Now, I'll tell you one thing that I really am nervous about. I think this thing's got a planet like ours circling it. This is its own solar system. We're about to have a solar system come through the middle of our solar system. This can't be good. But unfortunately, it looks as though that's what's going to happen. Hopefully nothing in this mess will hit us, even though it does say it will in the Bible, leastwise it does in my Bible. It says we can expect all kinds of problems. We were looking at asteroids. Right close to this thing, there's asteroids that are floating around right near that are orbiting the main sun itself. These things appear to be about 500 miles across. And as you go back into the tail, you get into meteorites that go back for millions of miles in the tail. This thing looks like a giant red teardrop-shaped dust cloud. And you can see, once if you're able to see it up close like we did, you can see every speck out there. I guarantee you there's trillions of meteorites following this thing. Now, these CIA people that I know say that we're not going to be that close to it when it goes past us. They're saying that in order to attain breakaway speed, when it comes up around the backside of the sun, its speed will at least double, possibly more, which will put it here earlier than everybody is saying it will, and that this thing will probably be about 20 million miles from us when it crosses in front of us. And then as soon as it flips us upside down, we're going to go into its debris field tail and be pelted with meteorites. And, of course, in the Bible it says they will, a talon 70 pounds. So if you've got 70-pound meteorites falling like hail, and I can guarantee you they will be falling like hail because there are that many in the tail of this thing. This thing has got a tail loaded with trash. I mean, it's incredible the amount of stuff that's in this thing's tail. And we're going to go right through that tail, and if it doesn't beat everything on the surface of the ground into a flat putty, I don't know what it'll take. I tell everybody, you better be at least 20, 30, 40, 50 feet on the ground and have either concrete or stone above you, because it'll break through the roof or whatever you've got if you don't. These CIA guys told me that this pole shift will probably happen from start to finish in around 28 minutes. That doesn't give you a lot of warning. When you see that thing out there in the sky, you're going to have to run as fast as you can to your underground facility, because this is going to happen so fast. Now, see, here's another thing nobody's talking about. You've got this giant iron planet that they say is 47,000 miles across, getting ready to come up past us, And when it starts to approach us, it's going to start and have real serious effects.
So is it a planet or a failed star?
It's not a failed star. I saw this thing up close. It did not look like a failed star. It looked just like our sun.
Right.
Okay. Would you call our sun a failed star?
No. Okay. Well, you had said planet. I wasn't sure if it was like a failed star brown dwarf or a full sun. So it's a full sun?
It looks to me like a miniature sun, just like the one we have. The only difference is our sun is giving off flames and stuff, and this one's doing the same thing as it, but it's giving off this apparent that this thing is just orange hot. I mean, to tell how hot it is, I was told that they estimated between 5 and 10 million degrees, but, I don't really know, if that's right or not. I mean, it's got to be pretty hot because it's sending all of this red iron oxide dust out into space around it.
Right.
And it's got this enormous, and I mean enormous, at least 50 or 100,000 miles on each side of it, this red dust cloud that goes all the way around it. I know when we were watching it, as it started to make the upward swing to approach behind our sun, it was amazing. The red dust cloud settled down. Instead of being round, it started to settle down into a V, like wings, upside-down wings.
Right.
And I thought, boy, I wonder if that's where the ancient Sumerians got the idea this thing had wings, because, centrifugal force is a funny thing. When it comes back up around the planet, when we see it in the sky, my guess is it's going to look like it's got wings because centrifugal force is going to be pulling the red iron oxide dust and particles out to one side, and then as it starts to climb out and go away from us, listen, I was told that this thing's magnetic field is going to be so strong, anybody that does not have a padded lead helmet to wear will have their brain gutted for everything they ever knew, and they'll be a complete raving moron after this thing passes. They'll they won't know, they'll pee in their pants. They won't have a clue what's going on, because this thing will gut their brain. And I was reading a deal in my Bible. It says that after this happens, that nobody will care because they won't be able to remember it. Well, of course, I was told by somebody the reason that is because the electromagnetic field from this thing will be so strong, because, see, as it comes up underneath of us, it's going to start and pull us toward it. And then, just like a pair of big magnets, all of a sudden it's going to lock onto us. And when it does, it's going to be like the Jolly Green Giant kicked the earth in the ass. It's going to send a jolt 500 to 1,000 foot high. This is what I'm told. 500 to 1,000 foot high shock waves all the way around planet Earth. They'll be so bad that in a lot of areas that don't have good solid soil, it'll fluff it so badly that you'll practically be like you're standing in quicksand. And that this thing's magnetic field will literally gut your brain of everything. And so you may want to give some thoughts to getting you some sheet lead, build you a little lead helmet to wear, like a little motorcycle helmet to protect your entire brain and the back of your neck, so that way this can't happen. Because if these guys are right about this, and I'm pretty sure they are, because I know for a fact they know what they're talking about when they say stuff. And and it does sound reasonable to me, knowing what I do about electromagnetic energy, that this could happen. And it very easily could gut everybody's brain for everything they ever knew, and they'll stand there and pee in their pants and go, gee, what was that? And that's if they still know how to talk. And there won't be any doubt in anybody's mind, because this thing's going to look like a big red dragon, exactly like all the ancient Sumerians and the Chinese and all the rest of them that had documented this thing's passing before. It didn't look like a white ball or a snow cloud or nothing. It looked like a big red iron oxide dust cloud with a superheated star in the middle of it. And I mean, and that's what we've seen. So, I don't care what anybody else says. There's a possibility. There's more than one thing out there. I watched it through the Hubble Space Telescope, and when this thing looked like it was across the street, the Hubble got cut off, and they encrypted it, and that was the end of any transmissions we had to watch. And we know that the Hubble, in order to be in the shadow of the Earth, had to be at an angle, and so that meant it was looking downward, and this thing was coming up underneath of us. And I tell you the honest to God truth, I personally think this thing is real close to us right now, but you know, that's just my general feeling that you know, and I'm a pretty psychic guy. I have the feeling that this thing is right close by and that we're going to see it any time. I mean, I've been doing everything I could do to get prepared for it. I'm really worried about what Jesus says. You know, when the fig tree is putting on its leaves, know that summer is near, and I'm at your door. And that worries me more than probably anything I've read in the Bible about this whole thing, the parable of the fig tree, because everything seems to be in place for this thing's arrival. And the bad thing is, he says, I'm going to come like a thief in the night. Well, it does also say in the Bible that I'm going to make the sun go down at noontime in Jerusalem. Okay, if that's the case, there's only one thing that'll make the sun go down, not hit the horizon, go down at noontime, and that's if the planet experiences a pole shift.
Okay, I got a quick question that you can probably answer really quickly and then continue from the chat room. Wants to know if you're talking about Planet X or Elenin, and I don't think, I've never thought Elenin is Planet X. Cheryl's pretty stuck on that, but I think Elenin, as a result of it, it's a comet that's been kicked in.
Elenin is extinction level event Nibiru is near.
Right.
Does that explain it?
Yeah.
Okay, because listen, they've known about this thing forever. And I mean, they've known about it forever. I mean, if I read about it in a science magazine in 1961, that tells you that, I mean, it's only 1,800 years away. How could they not be able to see it when it came around the backside of the last sun and headed this way?
Right.
You have to know they've been watching it, because if you know, Carl Sagan was showing stuff that they took with their old telescopes that was billions and billions of miles away, and this thing's only 1,800 years away. Well, and by 1930 it was only 70 years away. You know, we do estimate that this thing, let me give you a thing, maybe you can figure out your own timeline. We estimated that this thing is traveling around 3,500 miles an hour, okay?
Okay.
That was our estimate of its speed. Now, it has been picking up speed, and that's the reason why we think it's going to arrive early, because when it comes around the backside of the sun, it's got to double that speed in order to attain breakaway speed to leave the sun and not wind up orbiting it. It's never orbited the sun in the past that we know of, so that means that it's going to have to attain breakaway speed to head back out into space. Now, you look at the NASA videos, photos, and all this other crap those morons put on the internet. This thing is coming in, it's going to, as soon as it goes around the top of the sun, it's going to go back out into space.
Right.
And it's going to do this really fast. When it goes past us, it's going to go past us so fast that we'll almost have no time to get ready. That's my opinion, but, you know, just drawing it out on paper a few times and thinking about it, and I went, you know, if this thing picks up enough speed to make breakaway speed, then that means it's going to come past us. You know, this thing, according to what I was told, is that this thing is approximately 47,000 miles in diameter, you know, 4 or 5 times the size of the Earth, and it'll come past us, and we won't have a lot of warning, and we won't get to see it in the sky until it's on us. I think the NASA timeline is completely off. I think this thing is going to arrive much earlier than they say it is. You know, I know they're saying October, but, you know, if you look at the, you know, now, I was told that the poles are not shifting at 42 miles a year. They're shifting at 42 miles a day. And the reason is because this planet is rolling over to face this thing. Now, when it goes by, it's not going to push our North Pole away. It's going to grab our southern pole with its northern pole, and it's going to be like somebody kicked this planet in the ass. That earthquake that it talks about in Revelations, when the opening of the sixth seal comes, from what I've been told, that's very accurate, because that's exactly what's going to happen. There's going to be a massive earthquake when it locks onto us. As it goes past us, we're going to follow it right upside down. The oceans are just going to be roaring from pole to pole, as you could well guess they would, because if you take a planet that's 7,000 miles across and roll it upside down in 30 minutes, you're going to have some...
telling us about it because as long as I've been on the air, people are saying it's coming next year, it's coming in 3 years, it's going to happen. The ancients said it comes through every 20,000 years in a different type of orbit that doesn't go in circles around the sun, but goes way out past the Kuiper Belt and comes in basically at an elliptical. And then I started reading deeper into this planet, and there it was, a 20,000-year deformed orbit going out into deep space, 10 times the size of the Earth. It is Planet X, folks. Isn't that just perfect that this would just show up while all this circus is going on? Now, I want to be clear about this. It fits the bill of Planet X. They're probably 50, 60, 100, 1,000, I don't know, Planet X's. They've already chronicled hundreds and hundreds of planetoids bigger than Pluto in the Kuiper Belt out past the former 9th planet, named after the god of the underworld. A fitting name. The Roman god of hell. So they said no more 9th planet because we got to say we have hundreds of planets if there's things bigger than it. Well, Pluto's little. This sucker is gigantor. Compared to Pluto. They're in the news today, meteorologists talking about how the moon being full during the blizzard is going to make it worse, and it does. It affects space winds, winds of space, the sun, and a lot more. Why the full moon could make this weekend's blizzard more destructive. Who knows what this planet is going to do coming closer in to the solar system? Because here's the deal. It's been way out there for however long, and now they've tracked its course and think it's every 20,000 years, right out of what the ancient Babylonians and the Mayans and all these other cultures said this big planet comes through and that there's earthquakes and volcanoes and all hell breaks loose, and it comes through every 20,000 years, and then now here it comes. Now, I don't know if this is the one, because there's so many of them out there. Who knows what's out there? We're too busy looking at Hillary Clinton and going, I'm voting for her because she's a woman. Who cares? What I'm getting at is we don't have time for racism and sexism and all this fighting and all this garbage and all this divide and conquer when we have genetic engineering going on, splicing and mutating every species on the planet like something out of H.G. Wells' The Island of Dr. Moreau, squared. Planet X, they discovered it. 10 times bigger than Earth, the size of Neptune, a gas giant, with a 20,000-year orbit, exactly what a bunch of the ancients said. They said it when it comes back through, it causes massive catastrophes, volcanoes, you name it. By the way, Kit gave me a whole stack of articles about record volcanoes. I laid it somewhere, I think in there by the coffee pot. But I'm going to have to actually get to that halfway into the hour with Michael Schneider from the Economic Collapse blog and get his take on it. And here's the deal, folks. I don't want to say I'm eating my hat on this, but I've been very, very critical of the perennial books that have been coming out since the mid-'90s about Planet X is coming. It's a gas giant, 20,000-year elliptical orbit. You know, the Babylonians talked about it, the Zoroasters, the Mayans. I never said that I didn't think that there aren't a whole bunch of planets out there. They've proven there's hundreds of them that are out in the Kuiper Belt past Pluto. That's why they delisted it, as I said earlier. What I was getting at is constantly saying it's coming next year and constantly saying it's the end of the world and the movie 2012, and then I get blamed for it. They would, I mean, so many news articles going, Alex Jones was the one who said we didn't go to the moon and that aliens run everything and that the Himalayas are going to be, you know, at sea level. Hey, Alex, 2012 didn't kill everybody. And so it just gets old. But it does show how the ancients were certainly right about big planets that come through, and there are big disasters, and there are big asteroids that hit the Earth, and there are big Earth changes, and the elite shouldn't be the focus of everything. They're all busy. I saw another headline last week going, Alex Jones says the elite want off-world colonies to escape Earth. I was quoting top elitist on their way to Davos saying that was going to be up for discussion. It was mainstream news. So even when there's mainstream news that, you know, Thiel and all these other folks and you know, the Tesla owner and all the rest of it are saying we need a Mars colony for the elite, I cover what they say, and then they go, Alex is crazy and made this up. So see, that's how they operate. They think you're stupid. But I tell you, uncanny that the ancients said 20,000 years, bigger than the Earth, and all the rest of it, and here it is. The question is, we're trying to look at its orbit. I mean, is it even scheduled? I guess it's coming in closer. That's what they're saying. That's how they're able to see it now. It's coming in from this orbit. What is it? They're saying many, many, many times further out from Pluto.
The catastrophes described in ancient sources were traumatic experiences common to all mankind. Purged from conscious memory, these records are now interpreted as allegories, metaphors, and the trauma has been submerged in the unconscious. Collective amnesia. A revolutionary theory of the universe based on the records of the past has challenged the fundamental beliefs of modern science for more than 2 decades. Today, the unexpected findings of space explorations have confirmed many of the predictions of this theory. Mountains were born and mountains collapsed. Land and sea changed places. Great streams of lava flowed. The sea boiled and evaporated. Such were the scenes of unimaginable violence during the times of global catastrophe, as recorded by the ancients.
Here in the New York Herald Tribune, Explosion in Science, the artist's conception of what happened when the heavens burst. What happened during the 1500 BC upheaval, which we read about in the Bible as the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt, and the phenomena or upheaval that accompanied that. And this is the artist's conception of what happened in Palestine and Mexico and China. Lightning, meteorites being rained down as the comet's head came closer to the Earth, followed by floods. Same in Mexico, where water swept over the entire land, great gigantic tides.
There were repeated changes in the Earth's orbit, in the lengths of day, the seasons, and the year. In these catastrophes, entire species of animals were annihilated. Others proliferated from wholesale mutations. Mankind was decimated. Civilizations destroyed.
One of the most interesting cases that are these mammoths that are frozen in the Yukon or in Alaska, frozen in the muck and the gravel of that area, that still have food in their mouths. The flesh has been preserved in the ice, so that actually when they were dug out, when they were digging for gold, they could actually feed the flesh of these animals to sledge dogs. Whatever happened happened suddenly, as for example the tilting of the axis of the Earth and freezing them right there where they were found. Why did the ancients worship stars or planets that the average person can't pick out of the sky today? And yet, all of our ancient heritage that comes to us in terms of architecture, writing, and so on, they're actually obsessed with the idea of worshiping these stars, these dreaded planets. All mankind through the years have worshipped stars that we can't even pick out of the sky today. Now why? Why were they so obsessed with them? Unless in some way these stars were threats to them, in some way impressed themselves upon ancient man.
A book like Old Testament is read maybe more than any other book through the centuries. It's translated to all languages. And you read there about sea and land changing places, about mountain moving into the sea, mountain being overturned, mountain melting like wax. And you think that this is metaphors.
So, Stephen, a lot of people will have difficulty with the idea that the buildings behind you are more than 10,000 or 11,000 years old. Can you please explain to us the great catastrophic event that most likely occurred about 12,000 years ago around the world?
Yes, and this actually, I first came across this in my studies of ancient cultures when I started studying prehistory. Like there's 250 peoples around the world that have a flood myth, that have a story of a great cataclysm. So when you have something that's consistent at that, it seems to be, besides I believe that all myths are based on a true event in actual time and space anyway, so that it seems to be a consistent idea of a cataclysm. Now, a lot of Egyptologists and local archaeologists in the area think it was a local event which became the Bible flood in Torah, the Old Testament. Something happened around 4000 BC in the Mediterranean. They think this is obvious, and then Santorini, 1400 BC. These are the events that's recorded. But what clearly seems to be is they're talking about a worldwide cataclysm, and these events were not. So I lean very strongly to the work of my good friend and author I highly recommend, Barbara Hand-Clough. When she was publisher of Bear & Company, she published a book in the late 90s called Cataclysm 9500 BC by two British scientists and authors, Allen and Dallaire. They postulated that there was a worldwide cataclysmic event happened around 11,500 years ago and presented massive amounts of scientific and geological, anthropological evidence. Barbara took that up, wrote a book on her own called Catastrophobia, dealing with the fact that there seems to be a collective trauma in modern human beings about catastrophe. She leaned heavily on the work of Immanuel Velikovsky, who wrote some classic books in the 50s called Ages in Collision, Worlds in Chaos, where he predicted that he actually said he thought Venus was involved, that there had been some cataclysm, and he was a Freudian psychoanalyst, so he claimed it had left a collective trauma in humanity. I think that's one of Barbara's great books. She republished it last year as Awakening the Planetary Mind, updating it with what we now call the Vela supernova, V-E-L-A, that a supernova occurred in space between the years 14,000 and 11,000 years ago, which may have greatly impacted our whole entire solar system. We know for a fact that Uranus is totally on its side. That is not natural. It is not upright. And our Earth has a tilt, wobble, which gives a precession of equinoxes, the whole field of astrology, that's 23.5 degrees. Well, Allen and Dallaire are stating that this was a recent event, that something caused the Earth to actually break on its orbit, wobble, change the seasons, change the events. Again, I recommend people highly read these books. There's massive amount of evidence of that. I embraced this theory, and I looked all throughout the sites that I went with Hakim to see evidence of this. And every site that we went to, especially recorded in my first book, The Land of Osiris, the Boo Wizard sites, we see massive evidence of cataclysm, evidence of things happening. So what you're seeing behind me, we say these structures are built well over 12,000 years ago, but what we see behind us is evidence of that cataclysmic event. As has been said, all the casing stones are almost all off the middle pyramid behind us, which Hakim stated was the first pyramid. The original pyramid built on the Giza Plateau. It is on the highest point of the plateau, is the one directly behind me, and it still has its casing stones just at the top. We go to the Great Pyramid. All the casing stones are gone except just some on the north face, some on the west face. So what caused that? This has not obviously been queried. It is explained by the Egyptologists that the later groups came in, all the different cultures we talk about, particularly the Arab Muslim culture, attacked the pyramids. And while we know stones from the pyramid have been used for mosques, for other structures like the citadel of Salah ad-Din, But they didn't quarry these pyramids. As has been said, by you yourself have said, they didn't climb up there with crowbars and evenly take off these stones. The cataclysm shook the whole grid line. We see at the site, the northern border, Abu Ruwash, that pyramid blew from the inside out. Has been quarried, yes, but the explosion, the cataclysm, is what's called that. We see massive evidence. We could go on here for hours talking about the evidence of an explosion inside the Great Pyramid. We are not the only ones, Chris Dunn and myself, to have mentioned this. Another author has mentioned, some Japanese mentioned it. It seems like something drastic happened inside the Great Pyramid. The walls of the King's Chamber are not it's normal rose granite. It is blackened. The box, the sonic resonance box that is in the King's Chamber, is blackened a darker color than its natural rose quartz granite. The upper wall of the King's Chamber, discovered by Chris Dunn in 1999 when he was being videoed in there and they shot floodlights on it, is granite, not limestone. No Egyptologist has ever discussed this or suggested this. The whole upper wall of the Grand Gallery is rose granite, greatly blackened. I have scientists, chemists, physicists waiting that if we could get a sample of that wall, we could determine exactly what heat, exactly what chemical process, physiochemical process caused that to blacken. But there's no doubt that there was an explosion, we think a hydrogen gas explosion, inside the Great Pyramid. So there's massive evidence of this cataclysm. Every site we go, every site, particularly the Blue Wizard sites here, we have taken our group to, you see evidence of cataclysm. Massive boulders and stones thrown around, temples exploded out, not quarried. Quarried, if they were quarried, the stones are still there. If they were quarried, why didn't they take all the stones? Evidence at the Bent Pyramid, which shows its corners blown off, but still has its casing stones on it. Explanation by Egyptologists, it was quarried. Sure, you attack the corners. It's the easiest part of a pyramid to quarry, but why did they not take the stones? The stones are still lying around. If quarried, they would have used the stone. Blown off. The weakest point of a pyramid is the corners. That's what blew off. Casing stones still on. Every site, massive evidence of this cataclysm. It is not a theory to me anymore. I accept it, that there was this massive event. There are different explanations. Dr. Robert Schoch believes it was severe solar events. We think the solar events were a byproduct of the Vela supernova. All added. Many different theories. All comes down to a massive worldwide cataclysmic event around this time period, 14,000 to 11,000 years ago. Impacted all the cultures. Perhaps as many as 80% of humanity might have been wiped out. The 20% that survived went back to a survival stage, rebuilt civilization, took thousands of years, but carried that collective trauma, which is recorded in the mythologies of all peoples. You listen to all Native American mythology, talks about a great event. The Mayan mythology, Aztec mythology, Olmec mythology talks about a great event. And then what we have is the age where suddenly we become obsessed with calendars, predicting time, and obsession with equinoxes, solstices, and predicting eclipses. All the megalithic sites we see called post-cataclysmic, meaning less than 12,000 years ago, like Stonehenge, like Göbekli Tepe, all of these great sites are all oriented to equinoxes, solstices, because it was predictive. They are not pre-cataclysmic. What we see behind us is pre-cataclysmic. It's not oriented to any star systems. We reject the idea of archaeoastronomy. Hakim said the only star alignment for the Great Pyramid was the pole star when it was built, and when it was designed. And he said the pole star was Polaris. Polaris is supposed to be becoming our pole star again. That would make it 2 precessions back, 26 times 2. That's how Hakim gave a date for the Sphinx of 54,000 years. And the pyramid aligned when the Polaris of the star would be at least 26,000 years ago when it was designed. I say 15,000 years ago, the Hogbu land of Osiris grid line was operating fully functional machines. The cataclysm changed everything. It still produces infrasound, still has a spiritual effect on everybody. It is still a machine, but not as it once was, fully producing so many different types of energy. The cataclysm basically ended the Giza power plant.
I'm Nancy Leader on the Zeta Report. When Planet X was in the night sky, inbound, early in 2003, it was visible as a smoldering brown dwarf with an immense tail of charged iron oxide dust. When approaching the Sun in 2003, Planet X could be seen when this immense dust cloud reflected sunlight back toward Earth, as in this series of photos from South Africa on November 2nd, 2003. Clearly a second source of light, this second sun astonished those who saw it during sunrise or sunset. No wonder the chemtrail planes were sent out to fog up the skies. If they don't want you knowing that Planet X is in the vicinity, they don't want you seeing this. The second sun was visible in those days because sunlight could bounce off the immense cloud that shrouds Planet X. Then it moved closer to the sun and got lost in the sun's glare. But now it's outbound from the sun and moving slightly to the side so we can see it once again. This is why the folks laying down chemtrails are frantic and have stepped up the pace. Is there any other recent evidence that the outbound Planet X can be seen near the sun? On December 23, 2008, it was captured by LASCO, showing its long tail. And yes, this is a camera run by the U.S. government. And yes, this is close to the sun, to the right of the sun, coming at us in its retrograde orbit. On March 27, 2009, the SOHO cameras faintly captured the shrouded Planet X near the sun, this time with the legendary appearance of a winged globe. Not a month later, on April 19, 2009, the winged globe appeared again. Both SOHO images show the massive tail of Planet X drifting below. The winged globe of ancient drawings depicts the approaching Planet X, known as Nibiru in those days. And the second sun is back. On April 16, 2009, it was captured on a cell phone in Alberta, Canada. But the most dramatic evidence was collected on April 21, 2009, in Russia, above the Black Sea near the Russian Astronaut Training Center, near Moscow. The photographer took care to show us the differences between filtered and unfiltered shots. First, unfiltered, when the second sun is lost in the glare. Then filtered, when the second sun can be seen as an orb to the right of the sun. This is not a lens flare, as the small orb at the top of the screen is. Lens flares move about, and this to the right of the sun was not moving about. Later, the second sun moved behind a cloud, proving that this orb to the right of the sun was not a reflection on the window. A reflection would remain in front of the cloud, not behind it. And as the sun continued to set, along with the second sun, which is near the sun in our line of sight, from our view, the second sun dropped further behind the cloud. So check your sunset and sunrise views, as you too may catch a glimpse of the second sun. The Zeta state that the pole shift happens within an hour, forcing the Earth's crust to move 90 degrees as it drags along with the magnetic core of the Earth, which is desperately trying to align with Planet X, that bully magnetic planet passing overhead. When it's over, north will have become west, and the former poles will be on the equator. What happens during this hour? The Earth moves under her blanket of air and water. This causes hurricane-force winds worldwide and immense sloshing of the oceans. Tsunami on occasion assaults the coastline, but the tidal wave caused by the pole shift is larger, pushing further inland and rising higher than tsunami. For the Zetas, the general guideline is to be 100 miles in from the coastline and 200 feet above sea level. All coastlines are thus unsafe, but especially vulnerable are those cities on the water's edge, like New York City, Miami, LA, Hong Kong, Sydney, Osaka, Rio de Janeiro. Oh my, the list just goes on and on. River bottom lands are particularly vulnerable, even when inland. Hurricane winds bring torrential rain, with rivers backing up and unable to drain. Imagine your peaceful river valley flooded, as Burma was recently by a cyclone, taking weeks to drain. Okay, so water on the move is very scary, and being in a safe location definitely includes being on high ground. Anything else? Best to put yourself at least 100 miles away from any volcano likely to erupt. And per the Zetas, this includes any volcano active within the last 10,000 years. Volcanic ash certainly isn't healthy and can bury communities nearby. Heavy metals in the ash can poison drinking water, and the gloom makes gardening a near impossibility. Plan to be downwind from erupting volcanoes. And remember, the new prevailing westerlies will be blowing from what used to be north. When a volcano that had been asleep for over 9,000 years blew recently in Chile, the ash blew all the way across Argentina. Okay, so I'm off the coast and I'm on high ground, and I'm staying out of the wind drift from the volcanoes. Anything else? Some places have special vulnerability, such as flatland, when tornadoes can form in the whipping wind. Tornadoes stay above ground and rise over the hills, so being in a valley between hills or in a storm shelter below ground helps. Some places are particularly vulnerable to ocean sloshing, such as the inland valley of California, which per the Zetas will flood and stay flooded for weeks. The water coming in from the Pacific during the hour of the shift will roll right over the coastal mountains and pool in the valley. When the ocean sloshing encounters flat land, such as the land in eastern Texas that goes on and on like a pancake, the tidal waves rolling in have no reason to stop. Per the Zetas, Texas will be flooded all the way to the highlands, leaving Dallas flooded for weeks. How do I know if I'm in one of those special locations that is particularly worrisome? Read the Safe Locations documentation. This is a link on the menu on the Zeta Talk website. The Zetas have given hundreds of advisements about locations worldwide, and this is compiled into a document there. For instance, idyllic Caribbean islands. Just where would you go when the hour of the pole shift arrived? Escape by boat? Per the Zetas, boats will be swamped in whirlpools, and even submarines will lose their bearings. This is, after all, a magnetic pole shift. Lots of compass confusion. For instance, in areas subject to mountain building. General guideline: if the rock in the mountains surrounding you is sharp, recently broken, you're probably in trouble. Rock and roll can result. But even in amongst the building mountains, there is land that is flat and smooth, unbroken, like the Salt Lake Flats, for instance. Well, why is this? Per the Zetas, this rock is too hard to shatter. Per the Zetas, even Arizona benefits from that, as it has hard rock that won't shatter. But some of these areas are in the heavy traffic lane. Mountain building doesn't just move up, it also pushes over. The Continental Divide in the U.S. is one such trouble spot, as mountains on the Continental Divide can tend to push overland for many miles. Per the Zetas, this is going to affect Colorado and Nebraska. Best to be in the eastern parts of those states and out of the heavy traffic lane. The recent spate of quakes in China was in land just to the east of the Great Himalayas, which push east at that point. Some 700 dams in the Sichuan province are in danger of breaking. Oh, and that's another thing. If you're down water from a dam, that is not a safe location during the pole shift. Got that checklist going? Coastlines, floodplains, volcanoes, mountain building, and, oh yes, earthquake. Well, of course, the whole world will be affected with magnitude 9 earthquakes, so being in buildings or in cities would be devastating. Buildings fall down. They bang into each other when they sway during an earthquake and fall down. Quakes break open gas lines, causing explosions and fire. Lots and lots of fire. For land not over solid rock, more than jolting can occur, as the buildings can jiggle themselves into the ground. This is termed liquefaction, turning the ground into a type of quicksand. So, where does that leave you? Hopefully, 100 miles from the coastline, on high ground and out of the floodplains. 100 miles away from any volcanoes and upwind from that volcano. Out of active mountain building areas, or at least on solid, stable, flat ground. Out of cities and out of structures such as buildings or housing. Sounds a bit like camping. Until next time on the Zeta Report, this is Nancy Leader.
I know it's here in my stack, but I'll never find it, guys. Just here it is. Yeah, this is in Oklahoma. Swarm of earthquakes strike parts of northern Oklahoma, but even again up in North Texas, they've had some tremors. What's going on? A swarm of earthquakes has shaken parts of Alfalfa County in northern Oklahoma. The U.S. Geological Survey says 4 earthquakes have been recorded, and these are big ones for that area of the country, around Cherokee and Helena since late Wednesday, including a magnitude 4.3 quake with 5 miles east-northwest of Cherokee at 9:08 a.m. The Sheriff's Department has been reporting there's been some other quakes as well. I want to go to our guest to talk about this and to break down how he basically predicts these and what he thinks is causing it. Is it the pole moving? We know it's been moving at rapid rates and may even move faster. What's going on with Yellowstone? Is there really, because I've read this and talked to some folks that say it is there, that most U.S. Geological Survey seismologists are fully government funded. Or they work at a university that's government funded, and they've been told if you say anything alarming, which we saw a few years ago, about the Yellowstone could be getting ready to go, that you'll be fired or never see the light of day again. Stan, is that true, A? And then B, just give us what you think is most important first off.
Well, Alex, as far as what the muzzle is on the USGS, that has been a matter of public record, probably 5 years ago. But I have had a chance to talk to a couple of witnesses that were actually at Yellowstone, and when people were told, the geologists, to keep their mouth shut or they would be fined or imprisoned. And that was probably 2 years ago that I got the phone calls to tell me about that.
That's right. And the argument, don't they, that, well, this is government equipment, and so this is classified, even though it's not a classified agency.
Yeah, look, they even told the truck drivers that were bringing the equipment in. They weren't even USGS personnel. Don't you talk. They made them sign the little non-disclosure agreement, fine or imprisonment. And look, the data I got from one geologist there that actually is one of those that was told to be quiet and pass the information out through friends is this. They are monitoring all kinds of sites that they're not showing on the USGS earthquake plot for Yellowstone. And there is so much data being gathered out of Yellowstone by the government at the moment that they're having to use a supercomputer just to analyze the data from, second to second to try to forecast as best they can when there will be an event there. And whether it's a major eruption or whether it's a magma flow or a toxic gas release, all those are important to consider and to prepare for. But you know as well as I do, with the internet like it is, with the spread of news and rumors, a lot of the times without people fact-checking, that should a hint of this come from official sources, it could create panic and hurt the economy even farther. I don't know how much farther you can go.
Well, for those that don't know, the AP and others have reported USGS says earthquake hazard greater than previously thought. So, this is being admitted, but as you said, they then muzzled them.
Well, look, I've said this with you before, Alex. If we play the game where, say, you or I were in charge of the country and we wanted to protect the country and its people and the people from each other, if we were to come out and say the end of the world is coming tomorrow, we think, but we're not sure, then as an official announcement, people would panic. They would go out shooting each other, rioting, and that kind of stuff, looting. If we announced the possibility, not from the White House, but from unofficial leaks that occur across the country, then these leaks are picked up by people who watch the news and watch for behind-the-scenes colors, what's happening, and they spread it through the community slowly without causing panic. Now, I think you and I would do that to keep the infrastructure intact in case we're wrong, because, even with supercomputers, you can't really accurately forecast earthquakes and volcanoes to the minute, the day.
What's the best sign on the last 3 big eruptions? In fact, guys, you can search last Yellowstone super eruptions, and they go back over the thousands of years and the hundreds of thousands and millions of years, and it shows the areas. I mean, usually it covers more than half the country and changes the climate for a long period of time. What are the estimates on what the eruption would be like this time, and how bad could it be?
Well, they've been revising their thoughts on it, that it might not be 600,000 years between eruptions. There might be a 1,000-year window and that sort of thing. So they're being very flexible between 1,000 and 600,000 years for the next one. But they all agree that we're in the zone now for another eruption statistically from Yellowstone.
And how many supervolcanoes are there on the Earth? Because it couldn't just be this one going off.
No, there's this one. There's another undersea one. I can't remember which ocean it's in, but the third one is in North Island, New Zealand, at Lake Taupo, and we've been watching that too. In fact, a number of people have. It's going to be so big that it's the Yellowstone of the Southern Hemisphere. I think the other one is in the Northern Hemisphere, under the sea somewhere. And
I think it's Iceland, isn't it? Yeah.
Iceland's certainly doing some wonderful things as far as magma and volcanoes. Iceland's actually raising up out of the seabed because the ice pack that covers the glaciers that cover the volcanoes there is melting. So Iceland is starting to rise up, and you can see more magma activity along that whole long fissure in the Atlantic Ridge that goes underneath Iceland.
Yeah, and they're blaming it on global warming when the volcanologists know it's because of the magma.
Well, yeah, and the other thing is, why is the northern pole region, why is that warming up and melting ice like rapidly in Greenland and Iceland, and yet the South Pole is gaining ice? Now, that's not a global phenomenon. It is the transfer of electricity in the Earth system from the South Pole up to the North Pole, transferring the heat from the South Pole up to the North Pole, warming the North Pole there, but cooling.
And I've talked to astrophysicists who got multiple degrees, and they say that is indeed what's happening. And NASA admits the pole's starting to move. Is that connected?
Yes. In fact, NASA did release last year really high-resolution images of the magnetic fields inside the Earth, and they show in the northern hemisphere 2 north poles and 2 south poles down here underneath it. And that tells us that the north and south pole is really 2 sets that are splitting and rotating at the moment. And this is a pole reversal, a magnetic pole reversal, and that is generating part of the climate changes we're seeing all over the world.
Now, expanding on that, I'm looking at your breakdowns. I'm looking at the USGS. I'm looking at the Japanese numbers. I'm just a layman, not an expert like you, but clearly, isn't volcanic activity and seismic activity exponentially increasing right now?
Well, it certainly is increasing. I haven't plotted to see whether it's exponential, but it's rapidly increasing. We get notices here, Holly and I, daily, by the hour from USGS. And over the last few weeks, we've just noted lots and lots of earthquakes all over the planet. More than we would normally see. So, yes, it is rapidly increasing in numbers.
Now, I remember you were on about a year ago, and you said you thought there'd be more seismic activity in places that hadn't been. You talked about the fault line through Oklahoma and into Missouri and other areas. We don't have the staff or the crew to go back and pull that. I know it's on your site. You did say that. Why were you predicting this increased seismic activity? Because now it's happening right where you said it would, but also in New York and Illinois. I mean, what's going on?
Well, what I use to kind of guesstimate what would be happening rapidly is the fact that there were a lot of sinkholes all over the planet appearing. And these, to me, it fits in with my hypothesis that the Earth is expanding again. It has expanded before by as much as 25% of its old diameter. Now it's starting to stretch the surface and put increasing pressures on tectonic plates, particularly in the United States. And if you can, I don't know whether you can push a button where your producer can, but if you go to my website to the show images page at the top row, right in the middle. We've got today's snap of the USGS plot of earthquakes in Oklahoma.
We'll put it up, standeo.com, D-E-Y-O, standeo.com. We'll put that on screen. Go ahead.
Okay, and so what it does is that in the middle row at the top, it shows the earthquakes today. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
That have come down from Oklahoma down through Dallas and down underneath San Antonio. And if you look at that image I've got there, it shows that there is some kind of a geological formation that seems to, the earthquakes seem to be following that line. And so then if you look at the next picture on the top row on the right, which is a geographic map of Texas, you'll see I've drawn a yellow line with a black outline showing where those earthquakes have been happening in Texas.
It's right down the fault line.
Right
that
down
line
the fault
goes right through Austin, Texas. In fact, I'm sitting right in the middle of it right now.
Yeah, and the thing is that whole area connects to an area over into the New Madrid fault line. If you go to the second row, first picture where it says New Madrid fault region, and go on there to, I'm just going to tell you which line to go to. 1, 2, 3. This one shows it the best, I think. Click on the third line, first picture, which has kind of a white line, diagonal line cutting through it. And it shows the shaded area on Texas right up into New Madrid. It's all kind of connected in that weak part of the of where the United States should have split when the continents were splitting, but it didn't quite do it. And New Madrid is a leftover of that. But I saw that if we keep stretching that it would create stresses along the edge of that that plain, that coastal plain that goes up toward Dallas and Austin. And that's exactly what's happening. There is a safe zone, kind of a shield, if you wish, that if you, I'm just trying to see if I've got that. I don't have that map up there at the moment, I don't think. But anyway, this shield is a line showing where earthquakes occur from the edge of Canada, on the west side, all the way to the east side, down into Oklahoma region, and that is called a shield. And inside that area, north of that area, there's not many earthquakes, but south, east, and west of that, toward the coastal regions, there is. And that's what I used to kind of forecast what I thought would be happening here in the United States.
While Earth's magnetic pole shift doesn't exactly make the mainstream news headlines, it's not exactly a state secret either. For more than a decade now, scientists have been publishing evidence that Earth's magnetic poles are in the process of reversing. In 2003, the public got a huge leap in learning as NASA published their foundation article on how Earth was changing in this way. They plotted every position of the North Magnetic Pole over the last 175 years, and we can see that the 1831 to 1904 pole migration during the first 73 years was fairly normal, but that it was followed by a much larger jump over just 68 years, and then jumped that same distance in only 29 years. The pole had been moving slowly for hundreds of years, seen in purple, pink, and red. But then the 1900s come along, and we go orange into yellow and green. The North Pole has certainly begun to shift, and while the South Magnetic Pole is moving more slowly, it is definitively shifting too, and has now left the continent of Antarctica, coming up in the southeastern Indian Ocean. Now the North Pole's position was not easily discernible on the Mercator map, so we'll switch to the Arctic view, zooming in so we can see that the North is breezing by the actual geographic pole as it speeds up towards the side. Please notice that the distance jumps get smaller there at the end. Also notice that those are predictions rather than actual readings. And the past 3 updates to these databases have all predicted that slowdown incorrectly. So let's not allow that apparent slowdown to fool us this time. The poles are shifting faster and faster. Part of Earth's magnetic system is the magnetosphere, Earth's magnetic shield. As if the shifting poles were not enough, we notice a progressive weakening of our shield, similar to the pole shift. It's weakening faster and faster and faster. As of the year 2000 update, our field had lost 10% of the strength it enjoyed before the magnetic poles began to shift. And since then, we have noted further weakening, large breaches in Earth's magnetosphere, and then more weakening. In fact, as of late 2010 or early 2011, Earth's magnetism was down 15%. That is not exactly a great trend you want to see, and it continued with the 2015 data as well. As these poles continue advancing, the SWARM mission has taught us that the trend of magnetic field weakening is continuing as well. So where are we now here in 2015? 17%? 20%? More? While we're talking about the strength of the magnetic field, please know that it is not homogeneous across the planet. There are 3 areas where stronger protection is afforded to our planet by the fields above. One of those is centered in northern Canada, peaking out around 60,000 nanotesla. A slightly stronger field can be found above Siberia, and the strongest field, nearing 70,000 nanotesla, is atop the southern magnetic pole. However, there is a weak spot as well. The South Atlantic anomaly, where the field protection drops to less than 20,000 nanotesla, and where the Van Allen radiation belts dip into the upper atmosphere during solar storms, and where the cosmic ray reading record was taken, is quite the thing. SWARM is already detecting single event upsets around the world, with the majority coming in areas where the magnetic field is weakest. Far fewer overtop the area where the strongest fields can be found. So not only are the magnetic poles shifting faster and faster, but Earth's magnetic field is fading faster and faster. You would think a magnetic reversal would occur with one pole going in one direction and the other pole moving around the opposite side of Earth, keeping the poles pretty much on opposite sides of the planet, but that is not what we have here. The North Pole is heading across the Arctic towards Siberia, while the South comes up from below Australia. Because the North Pole is moving faster, their meeting place appears to be below the equator, near the Indonesia Bend. This is also important because in February 2014 we posted the video called Disturbance Under the Ocean. The South Bali buoy, which was removed from public record the day after that video was made, was showing a dramatic seafloor rise of thousands of feet, indicating something was happening below our feet, and it happens to be where both poles are moving. Even more interestingly is the opposite side of the planet. The Earth can't have north and south poles in the same place, so if one shall remain at the South Bali buoy, the other one should pop out somewhere around here. I say somewhere because the magnetic poles are almost never exactly on opposite sides of the world, so it would be this general area over to the left, just between the Bermuda Triangle and the South Atlantic anomaly. Best guess for which one of those would get the pole is up to you, but the fact remains, our poles are shifting towards one another. Unfortunately, the end result of magnetic reversals is not such a happy tale for our planet. Our magnetic field protects us from the sun, which would strip our planet's atmosphere without the protection. Wei et al. Brilliantly correlated each of the previous great extinction events on Earth with these magnetic reversals. Because of the extra oxygen loss into near-Earth space, Earth is also at risk from major starwater events, like Noah's flood might have been. The starwater danger here is detailed in a video called Superflood. You can also research Arcstorm to learn more about the smaller version of the superflood. There is a new danger now, however, that was never present before. Way above our heads, we find electric layers, magnetic fields wrapping around our planet. We've been talking about them in this video. If we lose our shield, we are at risk for a danger that can happen much more quickly than an oxygen loss. The greatest danger that solar eruptions pose to Earth is electrical. The sun can surge so much energy into the Earth that transformers and grids could be destroyed. We could be without electricity for years. This footage comes from the video How to Watch the Sun. The short version of the story we tell there is that the sun can send us back to the Stone Age, and that weakening magnetic shield is what stops it from happening and stops solar plasma from breaching Earth's protective layers and destroying the ozone and upper atmosphere. Extinction is certainly a possibility with magnetic reversals. Now, while many scientists admitted that a reversal was potentially underway, others have yet to reach that conclusion, and those who had always thought it would take hundreds or thousands of years to complete. But a few Berkeley scientists just blew that wide open. In case you couldn't tell from the pole movement speed and the speed of the field weakening, at these rates of change, we don't have hundreds or thousands of years left. The official word is that reversal can happen as quickly as 80 years, a human lifetime. We're already 100 years into this one. All those other video resources I mentioned throughout this video can be found right below. Just scroll down and click the links. Look, there's no sense in being afraid of any of these things. That won't help anyone. But you should ask yourself, are you willing to bet on the Earth stopping in its tracks and reversing this cycle? Or is this shift and the speed with which it is hastening something you wish to care about?
And we've been so blessed. People go, oh, that'll never happen here. I know folks that have been in some of these LA earthquakes that are a lot smaller, where highways collapse, hundreds die. I mean, folks, how many hundreds of thousands died in the tsunamis a decade ago or less, I guess 8-9 years ago? People, I mean, this is happening all over the world. We've been very blessed not to be hit by what's hit Pakistan and Iraq and Iran and all these other countries that just get devastated. I mean, I've seen numbers of hundreds of thousands getting killed in earthquakes in places like Pakistan.
You know, Alex, you chose the word blessed, and I do agree. It is by the blessing of our Creator, God, that we have been spared these things. But when we pull away from God like we're doing now, due to the administration, you know, and all the changes they've made, we can expect these things to fall upon us like judgments. You know, it's the blessing is being removed, I'm sure.
You know, it is really true historically that when governments do really bad things, even the pagans believe that if the government got real bad, that they'd have earthquakes and volcanoes and all the rest of it. And the Bible says that, and people always poo-poo it. I just know that it's pretty interesting what's happening right now.
Well, let's watch what happens in the Middle East. We can segue from here to politics, because if the United States is heavily involved, which it is, in the partitioning, the dividing of Israel for a peace treaty between, you know, Palestine and Israel and you know the rest of the Arab nations. If it is divided, we can expect our country physically to be divided by earthquakes and damaging, you know, geological events like volcanoes, etc.
And you're saying because that's in Revelations or Daniel, or you?
No, I'm just saying we've observed that whenever we do something to hurt Israel, something of a measured response comes from God to our country, you know, a proportionate response. So wait for it. When we hurt Israel, we're going to get hurt. And this administration, I mean, gosh, I tell you what, if you go to my show image page, second row down, right in the middle, I have a picture of Patrick Stewart, you know, Captain Kirk, in the movie they made, Star Trek First Contact. And he's saying there, this far and no farther. You know, they draw the line, and it's like in the Alamo, the line must be drawn here. We have got to stop this administration. Somehow we must draw that line now. And I can't stress that enough.
Look, I didn't take these pictures. I'll say again, I did not take these pictures. These are all live feed pictures. And this is their capture of the day. They're not reflections. So everyone needs to have a real good look at this and say, this is what I was saying, everyone needs to concentrate on looking at the daily summaries. I look at them all the time just to see what's happening. Start getting used to looking at them because they show a lot. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at that one. It's got a massive great thing around it. 5. Count really 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 2 big ones here. Now, the 2 could be reflections of each other. I'll grant that. But one of them is real. So that leaves us with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that leaves one big planet with another orbiting planet around it, which makes 7. And I'm starting to think that this whole area behind this is actually a planet. That's how big this thing is. We're not going to see it. We're just going to see these. And we're going to see one of these. It's going to come past real close. All right, let me reduce it down so you can see the definition better. Well, no, all I'll do is I'll expand it up first and see how far we can go with it before it looks too bad. Where are they? There you go. So what do you all think? What's everybody think? Reprojected view. So these aren't altered or anything. These are their shots. This is their shots of the day. Reprojected view. I don't know about the time thing. That's kind of weird, because that would mean that they captured these at night.
Back in the 1950s, most people aren't aware of it, but there was a scientific storm in America all through the late 50s about this thing out there in space, because the astronomers were all watching it, and that was back when they weren't afraid to talk about it. It was in the science magazines. I mean, I had a subscription to, like, Popular Science, and hell, it was on the front cover of the magazine one day in, like, 1961. And I was really excited when I saw it, because here's this giant red planet on the horizon of the California coast, and a humongous tidal wave coming in towards the coast, and having grew up in the mountains of the Sierras, and this thing in the magazine, it said this tidal wave coming in was going to be at least 3 miles high, and I went in and showed it to everybody in the house, and they laughed, and they said, so much coming around it. You know, we live in a solar system. We've got 9 planets and a big sun. This is got 7 planets and its own sun. I think this one is just a big, bright, reddish-orange iron ball because it's giving off all this red iron oxide dust out into the atmosphere. When we At first, it was just a teeny little red speck of fuzzy red dust. In the distance, but over the years as it went by and we watched it, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then finally about 2008 we could see this thing like it was across the street, and we could see that it was a blazing hot ball of fire giving out sparkles of red iron oxide dust for thousands of miles in every direction, and you could see the planet circulating it. Now I'll tell you one thing that I really am nervous about. I think this thing's got a planet like ours circling it. This is its own solar system. We're about to have a solar system come through the middle of our solar system. This can't be good. But unfortunately, it looks as though that's what's going to happen. Hopefully nothing in this mess will hit us, even though it does say it will in the Bible, leastwise it does in my Bible. It says we can expect all kinds of problems. We were looking at asteroids. Right close to this thing, there's asteroids that are floating around right near that are orbiting the main sun itself. These things appear to be about 500 miles across. And as you go back into the tail, you get into meteorites that go back for millions of miles in the tail. This thing looks like a giant red teardrop-shaped dust cloud. And you can see, if you're able to see it up close like we did, you can see every speck out there. I guarantee you there's trillions of meteorites following this thing. Now, these CIA people that I know say that we're not going to be that close to it when it goes past us. They're saying that in order to attain breakaway speed, when it comes up around the backside of the sun, its speed will at least double, possibly more, which will put it here earlier than everybody is saying it will, and that this thing will probably be about 20 million miles from us when it crosses in front of us. And then as soon as it flips us upside down, we're going to go into its debris-filled tail and be pelted with meteorites. And, of course, in the Bible it says they will talon 70 pounds. So if you've got 70-pound meteorites falling like hail, and I can guarantee you they will be falling like hail because there are that many in the tail of this thing. This thing has got a tail loaded with trash. I mean, it's incredible the amount of stuff that's in this thing's tail. And we're going to go right through that tail, and if it doesn't beat everything on the surface of the ground into a flat putty, I don't know what it'll take. I tell everybody, you better be at least 20, 30, 40, 50 feet on the ground and have either concrete or stone above you, because it'll break through the roof or whatever you've got if you don't. These CIA guys told me that this pole shift will probably happen from start to finish in around 28 minutes. That doesn't give you a lot of warning. When you see that thing out there in the sky, you're going to have to run as fast as you can to your underground facility, because this is going to happen so fast. Now, see, here's another thing nobody's talking about. You've got this giant iron planet that they say is 47,000 miles across, getting ready to come up past us, and when it starts to approach us, it's going to start and have real serious